Hi, Tara.
Hi, Tarik. Nice to see you.
Um, Delighted to see you as well, and I'm really delighted also to be and excited to be coming back to Yoga Junction after so many years.
Yeah, well, welcome home.
How long has it been? I was trying to work it out. I think we both graduated, was it in 2001?
Is that right? Oh dear, that's a very long time ago.
Yoga Junction started in that year.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, and then
1999. We started in 1999.
well, we were on the cruise, exactly.
Yeah, and graduated in 2001. Yeah,
There you go. So it's quite a kind of a nostalgic thing for me to come back and do a teacher training course there.
great.
We did one together a few years ago, and that was really a nice experience to have in a nice area, a nice space with nice students. And I kind of miss that, I kind of miss because I am a North London boy after all. I know I've moved to Brighton, but I am a bit of a North London boy, so it's quite nice to be able to come back to my roots and just share something again of my sort of experience and approach. I used to teach in North London for many years, and you sort of build a community of people that kind of resonate with the way you think and the way you approach it. So
Yeah.
it's quite nice to be able to come back again and share something with that.
That's great. Do you remember teaching in lots of different locations in North London? I'm just thinking about your sort of teaching background as well as your training background, so which we could chat about later on because that's also quite interesting. But I can remember both of us teaching in quite diverse locations.
I suppose in the first few years, you do it all, don't you? And I remember the main place that I was teaching was at Soho Leisure Centre, which I think is still there. But I also used to teach private classes all over London, all over North London, and health clubs and Virgin, anyway, all the places that, and I also did a couple of years with Age Concern, which was really a wonderful. I got this kind of feel for different needs at different times, and these days you kind of have these sort of specialized courses. Do you want to work with children? Do you want to work with people with older students? Do you want to work? But in those days, you kind of had there was this diverse need that kind of just came to you. So we
Yes.
sort of did everything, didn't we? So it just felt like a very rich experience. And then I came to Brighton and started running classes here. And it's a very sort of different feel in Brighton as well. So again, there's a kind of a geographic thing,
Mm.
as well as an age thing and a cultural thing, the yoga community.
Yeah.
So I suppose, yeah, it would be nice to come back and see how the communities have changed in Southend and North London area.
There's a lot of yoga. I mean, there's a lot of yoga provision, which is amazing. Quite diverse provision. That's that's great. I mean, that's a good change. There's also, I think, really a need still for very authentic, concrete, sort of uncommercial training and teaching. And I feel that's something that we're really interested in at Yoga Junction. And, we don't have the sparkliest sort of facilities or the shiniest website, but we do have some really, really experienced teachers, and they have got the hours on the shop floor and the just the lived experience to really create a proper, deep training, which is not all about lots of things that tend to sort of hog a headline. And I think I was going to, just mention a little bit about your training background, because one of the things that's really important about the way that you teach is that you've done really quite extensive work yourself in various types of training, and maybe you could explain a little bit more about that. But that, I think, that's has a huge impact on the quality of the work that you're putting out there when you're training yoga teachers.
mean, it's true. I mean, yoga has, and I have absolutely nothing against it. Yoga has become very science, and, and I've benefited hugely from this kind of approach. But for me, the essence of yoga is actually something a little bit more. I come from more of a traditional place. I spent 4 years studying Ayurvedic medicine, and this has informed my teaching enormously because my understanding of the body, the sort of pre-scientific model of the body, if you like, resonates with me. It speaks of something that is much more holistic than sort of the general reductionistic approach to science. So the sort of the idea of the energy body, the energy field, the traditional idea of chakras, the traditional idea of doshas, elements. I think these are all really very profound. They're much more profound in a felt sense than they are currently in a scientific, in a way that can be explained by science. And this kind of felt tone that people cultivate as yoga teachers, I think, is something that's a priority for me. And it can only really be experienced and taught, I suppose, shared or cultivated in a real space, because it's very difficult to kind of get people to feel or sense other people's temperaments or bodies or needs through the internet. So that's why I think a blended course, where at least half of the time is spent in real space with real people, working with real bodies, is really going to is really important, I think, for today's sort of real yoga teacher. I believe that yoga is about connection. Ultimately, it's about and connection can only really happen fully when you've got a real body in front of you. You know. So I suppose that's been a priority for me because the Ayurvedic approach, which many people now wrote a book for yoga teachers specifically on Ayurveda, and this is really sort of a distillation of 20 years of working in this way and contemplating the links and the connections and this kind of wider holistic paradigm around what is meant by spirituality in a meaningful way, in a way that not only relates to sort of lofty ideas, but the actual physical body and the needs of everyday life. So I suppose yoga for everyday life, for me, is about going back to the basics. And the basics for me is going back to the philosophical roots of yoga, where there was a little bit more of a kind of a dance between yoga and other traditional systems like Ayurveda.
Yeah, yeah. And the Ayurvedic support, or the Ayurvedic kind of element of your teaching, do you feel that is something that you share by osmosis? Is that something that's coming out in the teaching anyway, or do you separate it into a different course and divide it from the work that you do as a yoga teacher when you're training?
That's a really good question, because the certificate itself is a very fixed sort of syllabus, and there's certain kind of learning outcomes that we have to achieve. So there are lots of very kind of concrete points of skills and knowledge that we have to get to. So it won't just be a kind of woo-hoo type of course. There are very concrete things that are related to the body, the anatomy, physiology, and so on. The understanding of kinesiology. So there's a lot of science and stuff in the course that is really important to be able to, I suppose, understand the more subtle aspects of it. So I suppose the traditional paradigm in which I think is kind of coming out in the way I work with students who are, when we actually get to the point of how are you going to teach this, and how is this going to become a meaningful thing from the point of view of a student's need, rather than understanding the mechanics of how an arm works or how a leg works. These are just the foundations of, it's a bit like, understanding how to build a wall if you want to build a house. and it's really a very important foundation. But ultimately, our goal is to be able to create a cozy house where there's love in it, you know. And so to find that love connection with your students, that sort of feeling of what is it that my student needs from me. I mean, the best teachers that I find are not the ones that are technically brilliant. They're not. Sometimes they're quite technically inept, but there's something about the quality of connection. There's something about understanding the need and the temperament of somebody, and that sort of that connection on a sort of soul level, if you like, which is something that's very important in Ayurveda. That sort of soul, that understanding of soul intention, really, I think, is really the essence of yoga. And if that's lost because you're kind of caught up in the kinesiology of trikonasana or whatever, then it's a shame, I think.
Yes.
So I try to retain as much of that as I can without losing, the foundations either. It's quite a tricky balance, really, but I think it's an important balance to find. Otherwise, your students end up feeling, I believe, they end up feeling a bit sort of dry, like I've got all this information.
Yeah. It's undigested. Yeah, it's undigested information. Yeah, yeah.
The color out of a painting and just a black and white drawing, an outline of things, but the color is actually in the relationship itself.
How lovely. That's lovely. A really nice analogy. And are you so I can't remember how many courses you've taught now. Quite a lot. Is it feeling different for you now at this point in your life, delivering this material? What's changed for you? What feels new in this moment?
That's a really good question. I mean, I must have taught. I mean, I was trying to work it out the other day, and I always get myself confused because I think there must be at least 7 courses under my belt, at least. And it's very good questions like what evolves and what changes. I suppose it's as I evolve and change, my perception of things, of what is important, also changes, and I suppose I get less caught up. I mean, sometimes I notice that people get very caught up in technical sort of issues, like what is the name of this pose and how does that differ from this pose? I'm thinking, actually, doesn't really matter. You know, and I sort of, I find that difficult to convey after sort of 30 years, but to somebody who's quite new to the sort of the world of yoga, where things have to be more absolute and definite. There is no real definite, and I suppose the fluidity of the yoga world of the yoga experience is something that I'm realizing the older and older I get, that actually what the shapes that you create with your body, the experience that you have within that shape is really what counts. It's not, and where you put your toe or where you put your hip is just secondary to that. It's just adding a nuance that is not necessarily going to get you to the place that you're looking to get to in yoga.
Yeah.
Because I think most people come into yoga because they are looking for some kind of an experience of wellness, you know, with themselves. Wellness, to being comfortable in their bodies and finding a sense of integration between their bodies, their emotions, and their connection with the other, whatever that sort of other may be for them. And so these are really the essential drives that bring people to yoga, I believe. I don't think it's necessarily about fitness or becoming more flexible, which is the things that can be overemphasized.
Yeah.
In many yoga clients, still are today, and I'm still flabbergasted at how much emphasis there is on, yes, you know, if you keep on with this, you will be able to stretch this far or bend that far back or whatever. And of course, there is in isolation, there's a kind of a value as well. I'm not knocking that, but in terms of my priorities, it's like, it doesn't matter. because it's not going to necessarily impact on your overall sense of well-being.
No.
And that's what I'm kind of focused on, what I'm prioritizing.
It's really great to hear you say that, actually. I feel very similarly myself. Increasingly I have more interest in global and sort of the holism of the project, rather than a kind of anatomized focal thing. And although those things are sort of individually fascinating in their little way, you do have to look up and see the wood for the trees every now and then. And that's I'm certainly feel I've also shifted my own focus as I've got older and as I've done more things and work more with more people, actually. So, you know, having the enormous privilege to work with just a very large number of people over these years, and that's just the quantity and the diversity of the people that you work with really starts to change something in you, which is a great privilege to have that opportunity.
About the yoga culture that I find is that it has quite built on the sort of bed of neoliberal sort of individualism. Like, this is me, my experience, and I'm here to get something for myself. And one of the other things that I realized over the years is that, you know, we're here for each other. That there's an importance of community, and I want to encourage that feeling of, this is working with Kathy May, who's kind of cultivated this idea in our training courses. This idea that the importance of working with others, the importance of teaming and collaborating and cooperating. What can I bring to something bigger than myself?
Yeah.
I think the importance of community building is really important also, because as soon as you join a course like the Yoga Teacher Training, you are becoming part of a community, a closed community for a period of time.
Which brings us back to where we started, which was 23 years ago in a training course together, and we're still going. And that is how it has been our community, and it's been an incredible support and a lovely, you know, a really important thing in my life is these people who I met, yes, all those years ago through yoga, and they've remained my colleagues, my friends, my acquaintances, well, in the case of Nigel, I actually, he's ended up being my partner. That's not allowed these days, of course, but it was in those days. And I think there is this element of community can be underestimated, and especially in a big city, you know, so when you're in a big place like London, and it's transient, the communities are transient and people are shifting around. One of the really nice things about the advent of Zoom and all of this new online thing is actually that we can maintain established face-to-face communities better through these networks. And so, yes, I now have students who, you know, who trained with me for 3 years face to face, but who keep in contact electronically, which is magic, isn't it? It's the magic of the new age. So we have a foot in both camps, like you know, like some sort of ancient philosophers. We've got one foot in the past and one in the future, but it's a good mixture. And actually, this blended educational opportunity to come back to people who you do know in person through online material is fantastic. So your students will get the best of both worlds.
Oh, they're literally in two places at the same time.
Yeah, that's a city.
So Yogananda always said it was possible.
Hooray! We've achieved it. We've achieved it. Tarik, so lovely to chat to you. Let's do it again. yeah, we can talk in a bit more detail about some of the content of the courses and material on another occasion.
So if anybody wants to find out more about this, they can do that.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.